untouched wilderness, pretty much. What you see and feel out there, you put inside there and you carry it with you.
Good morning, everybody, or it's good morning where I am, and it's good evening where you are, I assume. Welcome to this webinar on how you can migrate to Australia, the lucky country. There's a lot happening in Australia right now as the borders open and the demand for skilled people from all around the world, including South Africa, has risen sharply. Unemployment rate in Australia is only 4%, which is very, very low, which means there's a huge amount of opportunities for people to move to Australia right now. So it's good that you're on here. The timing is perfect in a strange post-COVID way. And today for 40 minutes, we're going to give you an idea of how you can make that first step and make the reality a dream, or the dream a reality, should I say, of moving to Australia. So I'd like to introduce you to my panelists first. Over in Joburg, our representative in South Africa, Anita Matthews. Anita.
Hi, good evening, my fellow South Africans. I am your journey and consultant migration based here in Johannesburg, and I just wanted to say that you have me here on the ground at any time. So please contact me and we'll take you through the process today, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Anita has been working in off and on for the last 15 years, I would say, Anita. When we first met, when this company working in, we used to run job expos in Joburg and Cape Town, and thousands of people would come along to these expos in Midrand and find jobs to move to Western Australia or Queensland or wherever it might be. And, it was a real heyday, I guess. We don't run expos anymore. The format doesn't really work in this Zoom environment. But it kind of gives you an idea of how long that we've been working and helping people move from Africa to Australia. So really good to have you on board, Anita, and all your experience. Talking about experience, our Mara agent grew up and educated in Sydney. I can introduce you to Nazim Lalazari. Nazim.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. As introduced, my name is Nassim. I'm a registered migration agent. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, where I studied law. And for the last 10 or 11 years, I've been a registered migration agent, helping people like yourself who are looking to move to Australia. So it's not just me, there's a larger team here as well, but I'm here to talk to you today about what that process might look like, what you might need to consider, and just some of the different ways that, people can make the move down under. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you all today.
Thanks, Nazim. Yeah, and as you're speaking, we just put a quick slideshow of our team who how to help. We're small but large. We're in that nice size where we have a huge amount of experience and lots of knowledge, but we're also personal and small enough to look after you on an individual basis. We are primarily an immigration consultancy business. We help people with their visas, but we obviously are about employment as well. So we have relationships with employers throughout Australia that when you are ready, we can potentially introduce you to employers. We're not a recruitment consultant. That's not our primary. Our primary is to kind of help you navigate your way to Australia. For some people, it can be simple. For most people, there's complexity involved. The Australian system has so many different routes, as Nazim will demonstrate. And really what we're about is about unpicking that, finding the right route for you, and then taking you on your journey and helping you on that journey, motivate you, give you the tools that you need, and assurances and a whole lot of other things, so that this thing that you dream of actually becomes real. Because we've done this so many times before, we know that there is a way to do it that reduces the stress and also the spend, which is most important. Now, I did also mention that Nazim was a Mara agent. I think this is really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about what a Mara agent is, because that's very important whether you use us or not. We're going to look a little bit at the Australian job market and why that is so important now. We're going to look at the different classifications for how you can actually move to Australia. We're not going to spend a huge amount of time on that because there are so many, and every single person on this webinar will have a different route to Australia, but we'll go through the main ones anyway. And then Anita's going to spend a bit of time talking about what are the next steps? How do you know whether you qualify? And if you do, what are the next steps? We've only got 40 minutes. We're 9 minutes in already, so it is going to be quick. But at the end of it, what we're hoping is you know what the next step's going to be. And I think that's really important in this environment. So many people spend so much time on the internet, Googling, looking at chats, trying to get forum information. Look, we just say, hey, listen, there's an easier, simple way. Let's just start here with this one thing, a free appraisal. We'll show you how that works, and then you know whether you can migrate or not, and then everything moves on from there. So I guess first, Nazim, though, as a Mara agent, what does this mean for the listeners out there? What does it mean if they're dealing with a Mara agent, and how does it help them?
So a registered migration agent is someone who's registered with the Office of Omara, I guess, in Australia. And basically, we've got legal permission in order to provide Australian immigration advice. So immigration advice is quite complex. There's a lot involved, and only people with permission to provide that advice are able to do so for Australia. So that's why we've got a registration process. Every year we've got to renew our CPD, our learning, and so everything that we do is in line with the code of conduct, and the way that we operate is regulated. And so part of all of that is to make sure that the consumer or the client is protected, and that they're basically getting the best possible sort of help that they should be. So whoever you choose to use, it's really, really important that you double check that they are registered. You can check that on the Omara website. So if their name doesn't pop up, possibly look to find someone else to assist you.
Yeah, look, and that financial thing is really important as well. So all money that is invoiced and received goes into a trust fund. Can you just explain that really briefly? Because if I was migrating, that would probably be the most important thing for me, just the safety and security.
Sure. So like lawyers, funds that are received in advance go into a client fund, and they stay in there, and they only are able to be withdrawn as a piece of work is done. So should you decide we're migrating, you've paid for everything into the client fund, and then the next day you decide, actually, no, we're going to stay in South Africa because of family reasons, and you don't start the process, all of those funds just get refunded to you. That's why it's really important that you do use someone who is registered and does have a client fund set up.
Yeah. Okay, so that's you. You're Mara. You have been for many years. But the other thing about Nazim is she is a migrant herself. I'm going to. There's a screen that's going to come across in a second right now, which is a bit of a photo of Nazim and her early life. Which one are you, Nazim?
So the baby in the white dress, that's me. This is many years ago. The day we arrived in Australia. So that's my dad in the white jacket and my mum standing on the side holding the baby bag. They'd migrated as skilled migrants from the US. My dad had a master's in computer engineering, so had an offer with IBM. So that was us, jet lagged, arrived in Sydney. I believe the photo was in Hurstville with some family friends who'd picked us up and decided that they were going to help us settle.
Look, and I really like that, and it just shows that migration to Australia has been happening for, well, not that long. I mean, it seems young, but it has been happening for decades, and is a very important part of Australia's growth and Australia's economy. During COVID, of course, the borders have been shut and migration has stalled. So there's a lot of pent-up demand and a huge amount of requirement for skilled migrants. So when I say that it is a good time to move, it is a good time to move because the job market is so needy of skilled people, and they're not going to find those people within our shores. So I think that's a really important part to note, especially when you're saying, well, what's the next step? You know, and how fast do I move? Well, our recommendation to everybody is, well, start planning now, because the time is right. Anita, you're talking to people on a daily basis there in South Africa. You know, what is the feeling of the people that you're talking to, and you know, why are people wanting to move to Australia, and you know, is it happening? To what extent?
Oh, it certainly is happening. I'm talking to a lot of people on a daily basis, and probably the motivations varies, but ultimately for South Africans is they're looking for security, and especially families with young children. They're looking at promoting their children's lives, moving on from here, and the instability and insecurity in South Africa is a massive motivator. And particularly Australia has a major attraction for people because there's so many things that are so similar to South Africans. First of all, it's the climate, it's the vastness of the country and the beautiful scenery of the country. And then ultimately, our sporting competitiveness is another thing. And I think for people to make this life-changing move, you have to find things that you can relate to. So there's a lot of things in Australia that South Africans can relate to. And that's one, well, it's a part of the motivation for people to choose Australia as their ultimate destination to move to.
I think all those things are true. And one other thing is that there are also there's a huge South African community in Australia already, isn't it? So in terms of moving, relative to some other nationalities, it's easier to meet people from your own country if that's what you want to do, to soften the landing and soften the sort of the assimilation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. There's so much things that we do relate to with each other. And it's like, I was talking to a candidate this week. He says, all I want to go do is I want to go fishing. And we have fantastic fishing in South Africa. And so there's people in Australia. So people have different motivations, but ultimately, I think the goal is for people to improve their lives and secure themselves a better life. And that's the ultimate motivation for most South Africans wanting to move.
Okay.
And Australia is a great destination for that.
Yeah, and relatively close, right? Relatively. Yeah, one flight.
Well, 8 hours from Perth to Cape Town.
So I think a critical part of being able to migrate, as I mentioned before, is that it's important that employment is in demand. So if you are one of those people who have 2 kids, and maybe you've got 10 years experience up your belt, then you're certainly going to be interested to employers in the market over in both sides of the country. The unemployment rate across the board is 4%. For women, it's 3.6%. So 4% is normally considered full employment. So what we're seeing is a situation where, for most employers, in order to find somebody that they need, they're having to actively poach from another employer. And that's not ideal, because then that employer poaches from them, and everybody gets into this game of stealing their staff from each other. And nobody wants that. So the only options that employers have is graduates, but graduates are, often got all the skills and shouldn't say they've got the skills, they've got the qualifications, but they don't have the experience. And most of the holes in the workforce are in sort of a middle management, senior roles. And so therefore, for South Africans with the similar language, similar qualifications, similar experience, there's massive opportunities to fill some of those roles. So if I just push the screen across or ask, you can see that unemployment rate is dropping to historic lows. They are at historic lows now. The skill shortage in hospitality is absolutely crippling, because so many people left Australia at the beginning of COVID and haven't come back, especially some working holiday visa holders. mining is absolutely growing again, and given the conflict with Ukraine and Russia and some of the embargoes, then, for example, nickel production from Russia is not being exported. That's put pressure on the nickel mines. Construction, which is and engineering, which is government-led, so significant billions of dollars have been pushed into the economy in order to build hospitals, build schools, build highways, and rail in particular, as part of a sort of a COVID response. But there's not enough people to build these things, so it's kind of ironical. And then with a aging workforce and with an aging population, and what I mean by that is 4,000 people a week are retiring in Australia. So there is an aging population, which has put more and more pressure on healthcare. And of course, we're just coming out of COVID as well. So regardless of your occupation, there is very likely to be openings for you. So that's good news, but it's not all about the job. Some of you can get in, luckily, without a job offer. Naseem will describe that, but Australia is quite unique in this regard, in that you do not necessarily need a job to get into Australia if you're one of the lucky, qualified, experienced few. Naseem.
Yeah, that's correct, Scott. So the Australian migration program is set up on the basis that people have skills, and people with certain skills are identified as having those that's in demand across the country, similar to the occupations that Scott's just talked about, engineers, carpenters, healthcare, all of that kind of stuff. So if you're in one of those occupations, then potentially you can migrate without a job offer, because the government's quite confident that if you have those skills, you'll be able to come, you'll be able to settle, and they're not worried about you. You're going to slot right into the workforce, start working and start paying some taxes. Some other occupations, however, might need a job offer in order to qualify, because there's still a need, but maybe they're in specific places or there's smaller pockets available. So because the different visa subclasses have slightly different criteria, it's really important to know which ones might be the pathway that you're going to take. So I don't know if we've got the slide with the different subclasses listed on it.
That's going up there now, Naseem.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So the one that I've just, the first one that I referred to, which was the one where you don't need a job offer, is the skilled independent visa. Sometimes this is referred to as, the best possible visa to get. You don't need to have a job offer. You're not required to commit to any specific state. Once it's approved, you could effectively live and work and do whatever you like anywhere in Australia. The next subclass is the 190, and this is state-sponsored. So sometimes individuals need to go for this visa because their occupation's on the short-term list as opposed to the medium to long-term list, or they don't have enough points in order to be selected. So with a specific state nominating you, you're committing to that state. Thankfully, the states in Australia are quite large. So you've got a big area in which to live and work. And you're committing to do that in sort of for a few years in exchange for those points and to qualify. And then as you go down, you have the regional employer and regional work. So the regional work doesn't require necessarily a job offer, but you're committing to live in a specific part of the state that the government's trying to encourage growth and populations with skills. The skilled employer is basically a job offer. So this is the first time we're getting to a job offer from an employer in a specific region. And then the last one that's listed there, the subclass 482, this is a work visa. It doesn't necessarily lead to residence, but obviously you're getting the visa on the basis of a specific job. So most of the visas don't require a job first, a couple of them do, but with all of our clients, we always check to see should a job offer pop up as part of their migration journey, what options they might have and whether they want to exercise those options.
Yeah, so that's interesting, of course, that a lot of those subclasses don't require that job offer, but there is almost there's no expectation, is it, that once you have that visa that you must work in that job. I mean, you are, once you've got residency, free to do as you choose. But what does your experience show you, Nazim, around that?
So my experience has been that people will work in the occupations in which they've nominated for migration purposes. It's always easy for us to do what we know. But after a couple of years, people might change, or they might, move into a slightly different role. The only time that I can think of specifically that a client qualified for the 189 was an electrician client of ours who was adamant that he was not going to work as an electrician. We got his visa approved. He was going to set up a bar on the beach. So he was allowed to. That was his dream. but most people generally would work in their occupation because there's work available. It's easier to slot into something that and it obviously helps pay the bills.
Yeah. So I guess turning that around another way from a risk perspective, it's much harder to go out and find a job and then have the visa follow the job. If you're able to obtain the visa first, which gives you work rights, residency rights, then it buys you time and choice, essentially, doesn't it? Because if you are, let's say, an electrician and you apply and you obtain your 189 visa, then you've got that, and then you can come to Australia and you can go to any state and do any job at any, and you've got how many years do you have from once the visa is issued to when you actually need to arrive in Australia, Nazim?
You need to activate the visa within 12 months.
12 months.
But you can activate it, and then you've got up to 5 years to make the permanent move.
Yeah. So activation means landing in Australia. Yeah. So as you can see, everyone, it's a really good option and worth us really trying to understand whether that can be possible, because the amount of occupations that are on that 189 are plentiful. But also one of the things that we do find is that you might say that you're this occupation and think that you're not on the list, but you could well be on the list under a different occupational name. And I guess back to you again, Nazim, as part of what I see Nazim and her team doing is really looking at this law and making it work for you, the client. And do you just want to talk a little bit that, Nazim, because it's an important point, isn't it, when you're trying to find points?
Sure. So whenever we are formally assessing someone's sort of migration options, we get into quite a bit of detail. A lot of times people say, why did you select that I was this occupation and not another, or I want to migrate as this? And the reason for that is that if we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to migrate, we're going to come to you with what those options look like. Sometimes we use different terms for the exact same occupation. It's just different countries use different language. And we also have to be assessing people against something called ANZCO, which is the Australian and New Zealand classification of occupations. So we need to, sounds terrible, but we're trying to fit you into a little box. And then we want you to fit into those boxes that have options. So what we do is we say, well, you've got option 1, and this is what is required, or there's option 2, and these are the requirements for that. But once you know what you can and can't do, you can then actually formally start a process. Otherwise, you're just going to be thinking about it. Another few years are passing. You might be missing out on an opportunity because you're getting older, and there's an age limit to migration. Like, there are exemptions, but it gets harder and harder. So if it is something that you do want, then I'm always of the opinion the sooner you start, the better.
Okay. All right. And I guess what's the next step then, Anita, then? What should we do? What should people be doing to get started?
Well, first thing you should really look at is just taking the first step. It's like what we call put a stake in the ground and try and find out, am I eligible? Can I make this move? So we have this process in place called Your Visa Path. It's an online eligibility assessment process that you go through. And we're asking you all the questions that we need to know of you and your family, and we look at you as a whole, of whether you qualify. So once you complete this online assessment with us, and it's pretty simple and easy, we then look at you and provide you with a personalized report that's written by one of our licensed migration agents. And once you've received this report, we then set up a consultation with you where we go through your report within detail and we discuss all the key elements and points that you need to understand what it takes to immigrate to Australia. For instance, we'll take you through a report, answer all the questions that you have, and probably in the consultation we will answer 99% of them. We'll take you through the whole visa process, what it is that you need to do on your side, and what it is that we will do for you on our side. The next step, we'll talk to you about the job market. As Naseem and Scott has said, we're not an employment agency, but we do assist and support our clients during that process, because we know that's reality. Not everybody can afford to move to Australia without having a job. So every case and every person has their own situation. And that's why we call it your visa pass. We try and minimize your risk and maximize your opportunity to get you into the country. The other thing we will discuss with you is the cost. We know a major life-changing plan like this needs a project, needs a plan, and it needs a budget. So we'll go through it with you step by step. Every visa, subclass visa, and that's what Naseem's talking about, we will advise you which subclass visas you qualify for. We will also recommend what we believe is your best pathway into Australia. Then we will tell you what that will cost you, what you will pay to us, what you will pay to New Zealand, the Australian government, and also any other costs that you will incur. So at the end of this 45-hour consultation that you would have with us, you will have absolute clarity of what will be your best pathway into Australia. And thereafter, it is your decision whether you want to use us to take you one step further. But at least that's the way I see it. It's like immigration assurance policy, not insurance assurance policy. You have this piece of paper in your hand that tells you, yes, I qualify. I know what my paths could be and what way I want to go, and we will assist you all the way down the path. Thanks.
Anita, that is super clear. So the first part is free, which I can see up on the chat, is a free appraisal. Once we've seen that free appraisal and Naseem's teams looked at it, then we were able to give you a guidance that you can either move forward or not. And if you do move forward, then we do a full your visa path assessment with all the information. There's a cost for that, but at the back of that, you will take that person through the full report, and that's basically their guiding light for their move to Australia. And how much is that YVP, the your visa path? Because really, that's a spend up front, which gives them the full, I guess, pathway for their move to Australia. It's huge.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best investment you can make, and it's a small investment. It's 395 Australian dollars, and if I have to equate that to South African rands, it's just under 4,000 Rand. And I think it's the best kind of money that you can spend for just getting that initial assurance that, yes, I qualify and I will get the best advice I can from people that's been doing this for over 20 years and moved thousands of South Africans from, to Australia. So for me, I think it's a really, really small investment, and it's the first investment you have to do. Thereafter, there's no obligation until such time you've had that consultation with us and you are comfortable with us, and we can then take the next step, which Naseem will talk about.
Brilliant. Yeah. Look, it's very simple. Look, and I think, my view on this is that we've been doing this for a very, very long time. The process can get bamboozling. We just want to keep it simple, and we don't want to spend your money up front. If you qualify, you can work with us if you wish, as Anita has said, but there's no requirement. So we're very much about, hey, look, this is your pathway. You can now make some decisions. Some people try and do this by themselves. That's always going to be challenging. I think a big part of what we do and what Anita's role there is to help you with all those little niggly questions that you don't know that are coming, and there's plenty of them. So having a company like ours or people like us support you on your journey and take you along that path, and make sure that every form that you're filling in and every bit of documentation that you're getting is exactly right, so that when we do submit your application, it's not going to be returned with a request for more information. I think that's a really important part of the process as well. I think Nazim would attest to that.
Yeah, we do things with excellence. There's no point trying to take a shortcut with migration. It actually never works. So it's always better to do it properly and the first time round.
Yeah, and that's why that journey mapped out is so important. Okay, so look, I'm aware of the time. It's 35 minutes now. I think we need to actually start wrapping up. Obviously, I'd like to talk more about Australia, about how we can help you, but at least the free assessment gives you that starting point. At least it tells you something, and it costs you no money. And once you've got the result, you'll know at least a little bit about whether you can or you can't, and then you can start making decisions. And for us, and this is the feedback we get, we don't make these decisions, but the feedback we get is, oh, that really put a stake in the ground for me. That really allowed me to start this journey. It stopped me from spending all this time on the internet and talking to people. Now I've got a point where I can start to move forward. So do that, and you'll see you'll have the same feeling, and hopefully we can help you further in this amazing journey that you're about to go on. Nazim, do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to reiterate how important it is just to start with that free appraisal. If we do reply and say, look, it doesn't look like we can help you, please don't take offense. Sometimes it's just that your occupation and the details, your studies and your age means that it's, migration to Australia is probably not going to happen easily. We can still always go through the process should you choose to find that pathway for you. But it doesn't cost you anything, just like, a couple of minutes to fill that out initially. It gives you an indication of where you should be putting your efforts. So if it's not for you, you can, look at something else. But if it looks like we can help you, that's your first stake in the ground, as Anita said, and you can now decide, do you want to go ahead with a proper detailed visa path assessment or not? But obviously, as I said before, the sooner you decide to commit to a move to Australia, the better, because as you get older, it gets harder.
Fantastic.
So I don't think we mentioned it, but 45 is normally the cutoff date for skilled migration. Yeah,
it's tight, right, for some people. I wouldn't qualify, just so you know. Okay, and Anita, final words from you, being the local South African.
Yeah, so just as Naseem said, just take this first step, do the free assessment form, and if you do qualify, you will get a notification from us, and I'll be very, very happy to talk to you and discuss your best way to Australia and how we can help you.
Brilliant. Okay. Look, well, I hope everybody's got something out of that. As you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can move to Australia. Probably the number one thing for me about Australia is that there are a huge amount of options, and all those different subclasses are designed to help people from all different areas and occupations. But as Nazim said, getting into one of those boxes is not as easy as it looks. So, get that free appraisal done, we may well be able to tell you which subclass that you can go for, and then you're underway with your journey and taking advantage of the situation, really, which is the best time to migrate to Australia in a couple of decades. So we look forward to welcoming you on board and helping you, and hope to see you in Australia one day. So thank you, and goodbye, and thanks for joining us.